Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Bullets and Bourbon. I'm Matt Gunlock, and today we're going to be speaking to a friend, Karen Hunter. Karen and I first started talking back in 2021 when I was still on the Marine Corps shooting team. She approached me about writing an article about the gear that I use and what we do on the shooting team. Needless to say, this was my first time ever being interviewed for a magazine article. And for those in the military, we know how the press are portrayed. Karen made the whole process extremely comfortable, and when the product was finished, I was in shock. She's an intelligent and eloquent writer who has a passion for coaching and mentoring shooters and covering all things 2A space. So before we get any further, Karen, can you just go ahead and give yourself a quick introduction?
Yes, and thank you for that. That was very kind, Matt. So, Karen Hunter, and I am a freelance writer in the gun industry. I am a firearms instructor. I do a lot of business consulting and, like you said, mentoring. So, that's basically it.
No, I appreciate you coming on. I was thinking, I was like, you did me a huge solid, and I was like, I I would love to have you on and tell your story and just like sit down and talk to you and find out how it all began. So with that being said, like, what did you do before you became a writer? Consulting, marketing, and product development, because you've done all those things kind of in the two A space. What'd you do before all of that?
None of those things. Well, writing, yes. So, when I was younger, I loved to write, but always fiction and poetry and all of those things. In college, I studied that, and but once I got out of school, I never did anything with it. I did also. I was a teen counselor for a long time.
Hmm.
Uh, I did that, and then when I got out of that, I actually worked for a surgeon. So I was a surgeon scheduled for one of our top surgeons where I lived. I actually grew up in Ohio. So what's funny is I was never we grew up with guns. Like my dad had shotguns and we'd shoot those sometimes, but nobody carried. I've never had shot a pistol, nothing like that. And I was that, my kids were little then. So I was the mom, never a gun in my house, never a gun in my house, right? Like I was terrified, didn't want my kids to get, I was just scared. And it was a couple years before I started all of this, my brother started carrying. And at the time I was a single mom and he was like, Karen, you need a gun. I said, no, I don't. He was like, so he just kept at me and kept at me and kept at me. And so I finally went to the range with him and shot my first shot with a handgun and I was addicted. I remember thinking, this empowers me to protect myself. If I know what I'm doing with this, I just remember feeling so empowered. Not that I
Hmm.
was looking like, oh, I wish someone would try something, but one of your biggest fears, especially if you're single and you're a female, is somebody breaking into your home.
Yep.
But it so just made sense to me. So, and he said I was good at it. So, I mean, I didn't know if I believed him or not. I didn't know, I didn't know anything. So I knew enough to know I didn't know enough. So I did the CCW class, got my first gun. It was terrible. I went for the smallest gun ever, thinking, I mean, all of those things made sense to me. Just I want something little. I remember before I carried, I locked the ammunition in the garage. I had the gun in the house. I had house care. I was so afraid of that gun. Um, it wasn't until I took it apart to see how everything worked that demystified the gun for me. And then I realized, okay, as long as my trigger is protected, I realized nothing is going to make this just magically go boom, right?
Right.
Um, so then I realized also I need more training beyond what we did in my CCW class. So I was looking around and nothing fit my needs. I saw classes where you could, do calisthenics and do all this, stress, get your heart rate up, pull ups, chin ups. I'm like, okay, that's not me. And everything, jumping out of a helicopter and I'm like, no, I don't need any of that. I just need to know what I'm doing. And so I found a gentleman, Fred Masterson, who owns Force Options, and he had a training very close by to where I lived at the time. And so we got connected and I went to training and everything he was teaching, I'm like, okay, this is what I need to know. This makes sense. And it was at a level and in a way that I could really understand. I didn't feel intimidated. I didn't feel stupid. And that was another thing. A lot of the classes were just a lot of men that looked uber tactical.
Yep.
And like, there's just no way, so intimidating. Um, but then as we got to know each other, and he said I was, he's like, you're kind of a really good shot. He's like, would you ever want to learn more and be an instructor and teach? I thought, well, I never really thought about that. And I said, I guess so. So as we got to know each other and the more I trained with him, and my brother would come with us and train as well, um, he also told me he found out that I loved to write. And he's like, well, you can do that in this industry. And I'm like, what industry? Like, you can write. And I'm like, what? So he set up a meeting with an editor from, at the time, Athlon Outdoors. And that editor said, here's an assignment. I want you to just write about this. Let me see what you got. I said, okay. So I did a lot of research. I wrote an article. I sent it in. And then he came back with 10 assignments for me.
Oh,
And that was
wow.
the very first SHOT Show. So, and it just kind of went from there. So it just went, so no, I was the typical, you know, timid, afraid of firearms person. I am not that far removed from the people I work with now. And I think that's what's helped me so much, because I stay in my lane. I'm very genuine. I will not teach something that I'm not skilled at. I think that it's one of the hardest things is finding an instructor, or even out on the internet, just finding information and material that's common sense and real and that applies. There's so much perception of people that's bigger than reality. There's so
Yep.
much, it's just so out there. So what I've always done is I've stayed in my lane, and I've never tried to be something more that I'm not. I remember one time somebody wanted me to do an article on knife fighting, and I am not.
How do you write an article on something that you're just not skilled in?
Yeah, I was like, why would I do that? I mean, if anything, I tell people do not rely on this pocket knife, you
Hmm.
know, because now you've lost. I mean, just so many things could go wrong. People don't understand. An EDC tool, yes, but unless you're trained, I mean, of course, there's the something's better than nothing mentality. I get that, but anyway, so I took the article, but I redid it in a way that said, here's why you should not, think of yourself as a knife fighter, or why you should not rely on a knife for your self-defense, weapon unless you've done training. Here's all the things that could go wrong with that. And they liked it, they accepted it, but I wasn't about to come out and say, oh yeah, I
I'm an
carry.
expert.
Yeah, I'm like, do I stab or do I slash? I don't know. Like, these are the things. That's one thing I've always done. And another thing is, I have such a respect, as you know, because I did an article on you, for our military, and our law enforcement. And it's funny because in those sectors, most of those people are timid or leery of having an article done, because they're not going to, because there's that, we don't understand what the military's done or what law enforcement does on daily basis because we're civilians. And there's also a bunch of people on what I would say my end that portray that they have that ability. We're just like the military and blah blah. No, it's completely different. So because I've always maintained that respect and that understanding, I've it's been beneficial for me, because there's so many people in the law enforcement and military side of things that will come to me, well, Karen, will you cover this for me? Because they can trust me that it's not going to, you know go like it maybe usually does.
Well, like I said in the introduction, it was like, at first when you first contact me, I was like, somebody wants to do an article on me. Why? And like automatically in the military, like you just get these thoughts of, are they just trying to set me up or something like that? And
Yeah,
and and it's just like that go-to thought process because, like, we've been at war for 20 years, there are anti military anti-war people, and it's just like how is this really going to go? And you know, you we didn't necessarily have a rapport established by then, but it's like when we actually first talked, it was like you were a very genuine person. And we just had a conversation. It's not like you were just asking me questions. It was more just of a conversation. And then whenever the article came out, I was just like, wow, like this is
Yeah,
cool.
you did great pictures too. But that's the thing too. On my end, a lot of the publishers and publications want us to cover um, somebody, I don't know, like legit, right?
Hmm.
Or like, people start to fangirl or fanboy over certain people, and I'm like, well, they may have a million followers, but they
Yeah.
don't know what they're doing, or it's really hard. So would always struggle with trying to find somebody legitimate, respectable that would actually be able to give information for my articles so that somebody like the person I used to be can actually learn something. So finding legit people to write about, um, that's a hard process sometimes to vet. So when I found you, I was like, oh, he's legit. Like, it was exciting for me. So yeah, in your article was great. And I mean, you made it easy to write because, you knew exactly what you're talking about. So I didn't have to, yeah, I had to fix a lot or say, no, I can't do this article. So yeah, that was
No,
good.
I appreciate that. And earlier you said something about like whenever it came to your first handgun, which wasn't great, and you bought the smallest thing you could. Honestly, I have a friend that works in the same building as me, and she's about to get her first handgun, and I was like, well, what are you gonna get? And it was some small Ruger EC9, and I'm just like,
Yes.
look, all I'm gonna say is that's gonna be a very snappy pistol.
Yeah.
Like the smaller you go, the more snappy and the more uncomfortable it's gonna be. And she didn't end up getting it. I think she was gonna go to the range, and her dad was gonna take her out there and everything. And so she never ended up buying the firearm. She's like, well, I'm not getting that gun. My dad recommends this. My brother recommends this. You're the expert. What do you recommend? I was like, look, all I'm going to say is I'm not going to make any recommendations on what to buy. What I think you should do, and we can go out together and do this, is we can go to a range and we can test out a bunch of different guns because at the end of the day, it's what's most comfortable in your hands, what
Yes.
you feel most comfortable shooting. That's
Yes.
the gun that you should buy.
That's what I love that because so many, just like she said, her dad, her brother, people try to help. Their intentions are good, but
Hmm.
they're always going to give you, well, this is my favorite brand or this is, whatever. But it really is so hand specific and what works for me might not work for somebody else. So that's exactly what I do with people. Even like people reach me online too. What should I get? I'm like, well, you're going to have to go try different ones out. You can rent guns, and I'll give them, different things, to try. But sometimes like, no, just tell me. No, because what works for me and what, is my favorite may not be the best for you. It has to be what you're comfortable with. It has to be what you can actually shoot and shoot well. And it has to be something that you can actually become proficient at. For
Yep.
example, my mom, after my dad passed, she wanted a gun. My mom, 73, and she's just never going to learn how to work a semi-automatic pistol. It's
No.
just she's just not. She's
Shotgun.
more of a
Shotgun.
yeah, shotgun. But she's great with a revolver, and
Okay.
and I'm not one that says, "Oh, you're a lady, have her." It's not even like that, but that worked for her. A shotgun she could do. Now my niece, who recently she's just married. She wants something. I'm going to get her into something else, but we're going to try several different things. But I know she'll be able to learn that. But it has to be something you can learn with, train with, be proficient with. It and that's different for everybody. So
Hmm.
I love your advice on that. Totally agree.
No, I appreciate it. So, um, I gotta ask, we're going back to the magazine writing aspect of this. Oh, you've done a ton of articles. what would you say is one article that stuck out to you the most and what made it so special?
Well, I actually have two for two different reasons. The first one would be the cover article on Ballistic Magazine that I did with Anna Paulina Luna. She's in Congress. Um, I was the first woman to have a cover article with Athlon, period, and especially for Ballistic. And what made it so cool to me is that I found the article, like the article on everything about it. Usually they'll have like a cover article and then they'll assign it to a writer. But I brought Anna to them. So the first time she ran for Congress, um, she didn't win that round, but that was when we did the article. And it was just pretty amazing because she was on the cover and it was mine and I brought it to Athlon. It just felt, and I'm not like a I am woman, hear me roar, feminist anything. But it just made me feel really good because not because I was a woman, but because I was so new and I hadn't been doing this for 30 years. And when I started this, I didn't do it like everybody else. I wanted to be different and be me.
Hmm.
And so the fact that I could do that and succeed felt really good. But then she ended up running for Congress again and won. And when she had her congressional swearing in, she invited me to DC.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah, so that one is probably one of the best. She's pretty awesome, by the way. Um, and then the second one that sticks out to me is completely the other direction. I did an anti feminism article or feminist article, whatever you want to call it, in Skill Set magazine. And it was the first time I could write and be completely free and kind of say whatever I wanted. And I was just talking about how, um, these raging feminists actually are destroying what a woman really should be. And
Hmm.
I was able to do it in a fun way. And I don't know, it was really, I was like, I don't even know if they're going to publish this, but they did. Made a lot of women mad. And made a lot of men go, hell yeah. But those two articles probably stand out the most, were the most fun for me. So,
That's cool. I mean, anytime you can just say what you want and do what you want, that's pretty cool. Like
yeah,
whenever I started this podcast, like I was still on the Marine Corps shooting team, so like there were a couple times where I had a talking to from my senior leadership about some of the stuff I said. And it was all like, oh well, we got really drunk during this one time at a match, and my boss was like, look, our boss doesn't like us as it is, me and you, and him, we don't need to give him any more fuel to the fire. It's just
yeah,
like, all right, I gotcha. I'll be censored now that I'm out completely just doing my own thing. It's like I can be unfiltered and I mean, and it's a nice thing.
yeah,
It's fun, but I mean, I mean, I would say this podcast has evolved to a lot more professional than what it was back then. Back then, it was just kind of conversations, and there was really no direction to anything we
right,
were talking about. We just went, we'd shoot a match, and hey, let's talk about this match, but there was really no outline to it. Now it's like I got an outline. I got this professionalized. I had a friend Frank doing this with me for a while, and we're I'm continuing on kind of how we started it, and being able to just speak freely, that's huge. That's
oh
empowering.
yeah, yeah. And that's what made that second article so fun because, skill set at that time was a little more, racy, push the, I don't know. But so yeah, that one was fun. But yeah, I
But
don't know.
so
I keep laughing when I think about the stuff that I put in it, but
I'm gonna have to find it.
and I'll have to send it to you.
Heck yeah. I want to read this. And then I'm gonna post it for everybody else to read. It's like, hey, read this.
I'll have women coming at me from all over the place.
So you're a mother who understands the importance of training with your firearms and becoming proficient and familiar with the firearms that you have. Um, how have you taken that knowledge and transferred it over to your daughter?
So my daughter she'll be 16 in February. When I started this, she was much, much younger. So the more I learned, um, the more I realized I need to teach her, because my mindset before would have been put it up and don't let them know about it. So for me, with my daughter, the first thing I did when she was young was I took away the curiosity. I explained to her what these were, gun safety rules. And there's so many, for younger children, there's so many resources out there that you can use to help them understand. But I think the worst thing is to make it taboo, because then
Hmm.
they're so gun safety was always first. Second, especially as she was growing older and the world becoming, what it is, um, I needed her to learn situational awareness. Because the biggest, for me, what I teach is the biggest thing about owning a firearm is to try to do everything to where you never have to use it.
Hmm.
If avoidance is so key. So I wanted her to learn, first safety, respect for the firearm, things like that, and then situational awareness. So like now, I love it because she's kind of worlds apart from her friends. And if we go to the mall or we go to do something, I see her. She's not on her phone. She's looking around. We sit down, she's looking for exits. Like we would play games when she was little, like, okay, if something happens, scenario, like fun scenario, something happens, where's the doors? What was the waitress wearing? Things like that. Did you notice this? Or, just to help learn, to condition, I don't know if that's the right word, but to have that become a part of who she is, not create paranoia,
Hmm.
but being prepared. So, and then once I knew she understood those aspects, when she was about 10, we actually started to do gun training. So she's proficient on all platforms. She does really well. I have an older son too. Of course, he's good with all that too. But one of the things I did with her as she got a little bit older, and people will probably, I don't know, this may sound nutty, but whatever. I'm a huge advocate of on body carry. Obviously, she
Hmm.
cannot carry a gun. But if we go to Nashville a lot, and if something were to happen, my job is to protect her. If
Right.
something happens to me, I need to know she can protect herself. So this is why I wanted her to know how to utilize the gun. But one thing that we do in training is I will always carry on body, but I might have a safe like carry bag and carry an off body gun, in a appropriate, like handbag or whatever, crossbody. And I know exactly where it is. So sometimes we'll train where I draw my gun and she knows how to draw from my bag safely. And then we, engage the target. So if
Oh, that's
something
smart.
were to happen, if we're like, I just want to know. I don't. This is going to sound awful, but whether she's 21 or not, or she's legal or not, I want her to live, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So we do some of that stuff, but and she's good. Like she does really well. I think I don't know. I know I'm her mom, but also when I travel a lot for work, so when my kids are home, she's old enough to stay by herself during the day or whatever. When she comes home from school, I want her to know where the firearms are, how to utilize them. But not just that. I think a huge thing that people don't they don't do enough of is I do a lot of scenario based training, because if you have to use your firearm, you have to think beyond that. Like,
Right.
if I use this, am I can't, somebody's walking out of my house with a TV. I can't shoot them.
Hmm.
Is your life really in danger? So, so
Self-defense and defense of others.
yes. So, we have a whole like plan. Here's what you do. You go to the safe room, you lock the door, you get in the corner, call 911, point in. We've discussed and trained about identifying your target. That way, you know, if her brother, anything could happen. There's so many instances where people accidentally shoot, somebody that's not even, but you can see where they would think that they were in danger, type of thing. So there's so much that goes into it. But I not only want to make sure she's proficient in using a firearm, but when and how, and everything else that goes into that, so she can make split-second decisions. Because we don't have that stress inoculation.
Right.
And so many times people make mistakes or just because they don't understand. So I hope that answers your question, because I'm rambling on. But those are the
Oh,
things that, like, I want to make sure if something ever happens to me, she knows how to take care of herself and understands all the reasons why and things like that. And with my son too. So,
No, absolutely. Like, I think in today's age, like whenever I grew up, you know, I was born in the 80s and, went into the military back in 2002. I grew up in Miami, Florida, and we didn't really go to the gun range. I think whenever I was 4 or 5 years old, my biological father took me out to the Everglades with my brother and my uncle, and we shot, cans off of a car or something like that, and that type of stuff. And the next time I really shot a gun was when I went to the Marine Corps, and so I grew up not shooting because it just wasn't part of our culture back then. Whereas nowadays, I would say there's been a huge cultural shift in America to where we are more pro firearms, and I think a lot of it kind of had to do with prices going down on them, and the war had a big thing to do with it too because before the military led firearms development and came out with a lot of new stuff. Nowadays, it's the industry that really controls the direction. I think
right.
competitive shooting plays a huge part into it because guys like me and others out there who do compete, we're constantly testing the limits of these firearms. But back whenever I was growing up, I didn't learn until I really joined the military, and
Mm-hmm.
and I will say the military is not the greatest in being able to train people to shoot firearms. People think, "Oh, I served 4 years, or I did this, I did that. I can shoot a rifle out this far." And it's like, yeah, but you learn bullseye shooting, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Just because you are in the military doesn't make you an expert.
Right. Oh, the you're absolutely right. The other thing too, and this is what people don't realize. There's a lot of people, of course, anti-gun. I don't need to put my kids through gun safety training. We don't have guns. Well, they might go stay the night with somebody who does, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that might be it because not everybody advertises, oh, we have a firearm in the house, but it might be a house where that person doesn't store it properly, whatever. So that was one of the things too. I taught my daughter and my son, but if you ever are in a situation and you see a firearm, somebody gets one out, here's what you do, type of thing. Well, now she's a little bit older, so and we never had an incident like that until about I don't know 6 months ago. So she's a sophomore, and this she was at a friend's house, and her brother had a rifle, and he's like, "Hey, you want to see this?" And he got it out, and she was like, first thing she did was she's like, "Can I see it?" And he's like, "Yeah." So she takes it, make sure she made sure it was clear. She made sure it was on whatever, everything you need to do, safe, cleared, whatever. And she's like, "Okay, now we're good." And I was like, "I'm so proud of you,"
Heck yeah.
because
No, I
they have to know that stuff if or they're just going to be scared or what.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Whenever, when I took my daughter out to the range when she was 9 years old, and she shot now that she's 10, and I started out with her on a 22 rifle,
Mhm.
a CZ 457, and just targets out between 25 and 50 yards, and she was a natural. She followed all the rules, followed everything, and her biggest thing, anytime she's learning something new, like it happened last week whenever I took her to Top Golf, but like especially with shooting. How did I do compared to you on your first time shooting?
Oh.
Child, you did really good. And so back in May, June timeframe, I let her shoot my AR-15.
Mhm.
And she's hitting 2-inch targets at 100 yards. She's hitting an 8-inch plate at 300 yards.
That's impressive.
Um, I mean, I'm just like, Jesus, like this kid is good. And you can just see her facial expressions, and you can just see the level of focus, like looking through the ocular lens of the scope, and
Mhm.
just watching the concentration on the trigger press, and she's not jerking it. She's not like she's not scared of the gun going boom. She's very natural at it.
That's
And then her first thing is, how am I compared to you when you first did this? Is like, Jesus, child. It's funny. She did that last week. She came up to me quietly at Top Golf. am I better than you when you first started this? Yes, child, you are. But you see that confidence boost.
Oh yeah, yeah. I love it. I love the drive she has. That's awesome. I think it's a good
Hmm.
thing.
Oh yeah. No, and I mean that just propels her to want to do it more and get
Mhm.
better at it. I want her to be better than me. If
Yeah,
I wouldn't be a good father if I didn't want her to be better than what I was.
absolutely. I tell my kids all the time, I want you to exceed me. I want you to be so much better, and yeah, it's so I think that's adorable though. I love that
Oh yeah.
little competitive spirit, and it shows that she respects you and thinks highly of you because that is who she wants to, you know.
She'll never say it, but yes, I
Yeah, yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah. That's why she's that way. So I think that's awesome.
So, kind of on that same thing, how's your daughter progressed with the lessons that you have taught? What were her initial reactions? And have you seen a boost in confidence in both yourself and herself in becoming comfortable with the handling of firearms?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, she was pretty young, and it's pretty much a constant topic because of what I do, in our house. They're used to seeing guns and guns coming in, and because I write, I get things in. Um, but yeah, when she became about 11, 12, and really started truly understanding some of these principles and things like that, she just she's very confident. She's very independent. She's not fearful of the world. She's more I don't know what you would call it, but she's very she's yeah, she's like I forget where we went, and there was a group of like, I don't know, scary guys, right? And we had her friend with us, and her friend was like between us holding our,
Just
arms. And
clenching.
yeah, and Chloe's like, no, don't be afraid, don't look afraid, we just have to go this way, or it's just she's very very confident. It's not about ego. Like she's a good shot, and she knows what she's doing, but she's not arrogant about that. Like she totally understands um the importance of it, and it makes me feel good because when she does turn 19, 20, 21, goes off to college, whatever, and when she can legally carry, she's already going to be there. I also teach her that you are forever a student. It is a
Hmm.
skill. This is something that we have to constantly be training and staying apprised on all the information and what's changed, what's new, things like that. But I think one of the neatest things though is I love how it hasn't made her afraid of the world, but she's also not oblivious. Like she wants to hear the things that are going on in the news and things that happen. Um, and versus scaring her, it has, I think, made her more prepared and accepting, okay, this is real life. And, 9 times out of 10, maybe nothing's going to happen, but there's always a chance.
Oh
You
yeah.
And I love that she's just not fearful of it. The other thing would be, I'm losing my train of thought now. We'll skip that because now I forgot what I was going to say. But yeah. And my son too, he's older, he's 24. But I love when he does little things. They went out of, they went down to Nashville or whatever for New Year's, and he's so cute because he's always like, I am not going to take this and this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to keep it here and da da da, because he knows I'll be, he doesn't want me to think he's being irresponsible. I don't know. So I just think that the worst thing we could do is not educate our kids on that type of thing, because if they understand that, then they're empowered. And it doesn't mean
Absolutely.
they're going to wield a gun and, go, if anything, it just makes them more prepared. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. The other thing that I think that goes right along in with this is teaching about like cyber and internet safety,
Yes.
security, social media, things like that. That's another thing I teach, and I teach parents to help prepare their kids and things like that. I think it all goes hand in hand, because as if they're learning, it's not just about learning firearms, it's as a whole, just to become empowered, to be able to be independent, to take care of yourself, to know what to look out for, to not be a soft target ever, in every single way. So for me, all of that kind of goes hand in hand.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's I think we've grown smarter as a society. To an extent. I think we're much more aware of us as a society. And, as parents, we kind of do have to stay on top of those things. I I haven't delved into some of those subjects yet with my daughter. She's only 10. But she's very self-aware, and she's very aware of, the things that I've had to do now. Up until I retired, like prior to me retiring a couple years ago, she just saw that I wore a uniform, I was going into work, and I was coming home, or I'm going away for six months to a year. She never really knew what was going on. And then whenever I retired, one of my friends, Alex, put together a highlight reel of the start of my career all the way until the end, and it had pictures from like each parts of my career on deployment, stuff like that, bombs going off, like just different stuff like that. And she had no idea, and she didn't know the impact. She didn't know what it was I was doing. And I kind of did keep that from her. But then one day we were just sat on the couch together, and she was like, Dad, did you ever have to kill anybody? I was like, yeah, I did. And I
Yeah.
was open about it. I'm not going to hold it back from her. And I've had this conversation on the podcast before on one of the recent episodes that was just released. But, you know, I won't take that away from her if she's curious about it, and I will explain it in such a way to where, she's comfortable with me talking to her
Mhm.
about it. As long as she understands I had to do things that I had to do, and I wasn't mean. I wasn't, I I was doing a job, and
Yeah,
I was.
you handled that great. I think we want to keep our children innocent and
Mhm.
carefree as long as possible. So, and it's different. Like parents will ask me all the time, at what age? At what age? I'm like, that's completely dependent on your child.
It's their maturity level and what
Yeah,
they can
it's
process and handle.
different. My son, I could have never started at 10.
Hmm.
Started a little bit later, but there was just a difference. And it's not that one was less than or more than the other, just different, where they're at, what they can understand, what they can, like you said, what they can process. So, and I don't think it was keeping anything from your daughter, but when she's asking, she's obviously ready to know certain things, and then we as parents need to explain it like you did on a level they can understand. So I think that's amazing. And I
Yeah.
think when we're honest with our children, with certain things, I don't think we always have to be 100% transparent about everything. We have to remember we're the parent, they're the kid. But
Yep.
when we're able to have those hard conversations, or we're able to tell them things in ways they can understand, that also builds their confidence because we're trusting our kids. We're saying to them, "You're smart. You
Yeah.
know, you are able to understand this. And we're not just keeping them in the dark. You know what I mean, about anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's different with every family and every kid, and
Yeah.
so
And she gets a firsthand, it, she gets a firsthand exposure to things that happened in this world. And I'm not going to hold back.
yeah,
It's I think it's a duty as a parent to kind of do that.
I think so too. Otherwise, they won't be ready for anything. And I think
Hmm.
too, especially with the world we live in now, sadly, they're introduced to so many things at a much younger age, or different situations at a much younger age than I know. Like when she was younger, she'd come home asking me questions. I'm like, what? Like I didn't even know what that was in middle school. So how are you knowing that in the fourth grade? But I think the better we can equip them,
The more they're going to be ready for the world whenever they have to go out on their own.
and I think the better humans they'll be.
Yeah.
Better balance, better. I don't know. That's just what I think. So
No, I agree with that. So we've talked a lot about, instructing our children, but you also train people. You've kind of alluded to that whenever you first got your start into writing and all that, that you got into that. So, um, what platforms do you teach? What do you enjoy teaching the most? And who do you specifically gear your classes to?
I'm certified on handgun, shotgun, and carbine. Um, and I like all three. I really don't have a favorite. Um, I do one of the favorite, I think if I were to teach like the aspect of training that's my favorite is basically scenario based training. Like I'll ask people, where do you keep your gun? Where's your self defense gun? Oh, it's on my nightstand. I'm like, okay. um we'll talk about things like I never judge anybody, do what you need to do. But, do you have kids that come to your house? Does everybody know where it is? Blah, blah, blah. Are you a heavy sleeper? Is there a chance somebody could come in there and use that against you? Different things like that. But I will try to build scenarios. For example, like the one gentleman that swore he could never go anywhere but his nightstand. I'm like, all right, you need to wake up in the middle of the night in the dark with it not loaded, obviously,
Yeah.
and access it. Like how many times do we knock our cell phone off onto the floor? How many times? So I love to do trainings where people don't think about that type of thing. I'll talk about if you store it in a safe. It,
How long does it take for you to get to your safe and get it open and
yeah,
get
I
actions on the objective?
swear biometric only. That's all she would have. And I'm like, I mean, that's fine, but you need to have another way to access it. Like, what if you're washing your hands? Your hands are wet. I mean, so many things. Um, and then some people don't want to safe at all. That's fine. But wherever you have it, you need to put yourself in situations where, like, scenario based training. And that's what we'll do. Sometimes we'll do it like in a shoot house and we'll do sim guns and things like that. But, here's your situation. I gave you one, handle it. And 9 times out of 10, people are just like, what? Oh, and then it becomes very real to them. And so I do a lot of that. I do a lot of introduction training where they just, basically flat range training where we go through the fundamentals, how to load, how to unload, basically just how to truly become proficient with your firearm. My favorite, I think, type of class to teach would be any of those platforms, but I love one on one instruction.
Hmm.
I love taking someone who is at that place that I was at, that they just are starving for real common sense knowledge and they just need to know what they need to do for what their lifestyle requires. And I love working with somebody like that, or taking someone who doesn't think that they can do this and then suddenly they see that they can and they know that they're able to. And that empowerment, I think, is just when that light goes off and you see it happening. I love that. A lot of people think I only teach women, but if I were to be honest, I have more male students than I do female, because there's a whole group of men. And just as I felt intimidated to go into a class as a woman, there are men who don't really know how to use a firearm. So going to a class full of men
Hmm.
brings out that, oh, I'm a man, I should know how to do this, that kind of mentality. So I have a lot of guys that'll come to me for one-on-one instructions just to get up to par so that they can go do a class like that and not feel um less than, or as intimidated. Does that make sense? I don't know.
No, it
Uh,
does.
but yeah, so I teach families. I do large group trainings. A lot of times I'll teach with Fred Masterson. We'll teach together for large groups and things like that. um, and then I do a lot of one-on-one. So it just kind of varies, but there's really no one specific age group. It's just whoever. Um, I've had some elderly, very elderly senior citizens come in that, that's always sometimes a challenge, but, because you have to then, there's a lot that goes into that. So, you know, I don't know, but
You
that's,
generally have to break things down a lot more and you have
mhm,
to take your time and it tends to be a longer day whenever it comes to, you
yeah.
know,
And
there,
sometimes
the,
people want to jump in and do, it's like, okay, you're not gonna be able to do that at this point. Like, let's start here. And people just, usually they come around, they understand. But yeah, so for me, it's just, I think I really don't have an interest in doing any of the way far advanced classes with people that my passion is for the new gun person, or the people that just need to know what to do in their home, that type of thing. So I'm huge on education and just wanting to make a difference so people have a real understanding and a real grasp of why they have a firearm, why they need to have a plan, not just for a firearm, but, any kind of emergency. So I kind of cover all that as a whole, and I don't know. It just makes me feel like I'm making a difference somehow because
Oh,
I wish somebody
absolutely.
had done that with me sooner.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not that far removed. I sometimes it's funny because people will say, "Oh, that was a stupid question," and I'm like, "No, how people don't know what they don't know." Like to us, sometimes if we've been doing this for a while, we're like, "Oh my gosh," but no, like this is exactly why people avoid training. So that's kind of where, yeah, that's kind of where I keep my instruction on
So
those.
if No, absolutely. In sometimes as an instructor, like we do have so much knowledge that there are times we forget I should have inserted this bit of information or that bit of information. I should have thought of this. And there's just so much that people don't realize that goes into it that even us as the instructors, we tend to forget stuff that we should have included just because we're covering such a wide range of information and knowledge.
Oh, absolutely. I had a friend that's an instructor, and he'd always, all of his classes have been with people that were not beginners. So, you know, they checked every box for all these things, right? So he's like, I think I want to do a brand new beginner class for ladies. And I'm like, really? It's like, because you got to take that way down. And he's like, will you do it with me? And I'm like, yeah. He had no idea, or he had forgotten, like these women.
Those the teaching new people is, I would say that's the most difficult form of teaching there is.
Yeah, because you can't, I mean, you have to go down to the basic. Like that day, the women didn't even get to shoot because, one of the first questions was, what makes this go boom? But it's a reality. There's people that realize they need to be able to protect themselves, but no idea. They've never been around a gun. They've never, sometimes I help people out like that. Like people will do a beginner's class and I'm like, Karen, you wanna come in here with me? I'm like, yeah, I'll come do that with you because I don't know, I'm just a little more I pay close attention. I can kind of pick up when someone's scared or when someone's, you know, whatever. But yeah, but that's always very rewarding to me. So
No, that's awesome. So if somebody did want to take one of your classes, what would be the best way of them getting in contact with you?
I have a website, so it's Karen at thekarenhunter.com or any social media platform to just DM me and I can set it up that way.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all I have for this interview, but is there anything else you would like to add?
Oh gosh, I don't know. The hardest thing to do is talking about yourself. I end up just rambling. I don't know. I guess that for anybody that is going to take training, one of my biggest things is vet your instructor. Like really, really do your research. I think that, and it's going to sound terrible, but there are so many places that can certify you in a weekend, or and just because somebody has, especially with social media nowadays, the perception can seem so much bigger than the reality. So to just really do your research, talk to people, um, you know, figure out what it is that you need, because just some, I don't know, we can
Give them
like,
a call. It's almost like a
yeah.
job interview. You are interviewing them to teach you.
Oh,
So,
that's the other thing. If somebody, I mean, I can be as nice as can be, but I may not mesh well with everybody.
mhm.
Everybody has a different style of learning, so these are all the things that people need to find out. And so if you're going to get a firearm, that's my other thing, you have to train, like make sure you train and find a good instructor. So I guess that's kind of my soapbox for that.
Yeah.
But
No, I agree with all of that information. And I was gonna go somewhere with this, and yeah, I'm drawing a blank myself at this point. But um, yeah. No, I appreciate you coming on, and to the listeners, I hope you got something out of this. And to any new shooters, actually, I remember what I was going to say. It comes down to the concealed carry classes.
yeah.
Don't think that just because you went to a class to get your concealed carry license, that class is the end all be all, that you shot 40 rounds on a target and hit a silhouette style target. That is not the end all be all. Like whenever you take on your concealed carry holder, um, that That's all you have to do. No, you should constantly be willing to train, because the second you pull your pistol out or whatever weapon out in self-defense, now it becomes real. And if you can't hit what you're aiming at, or you're not comfortable, you know, shooting a target, it's gonna show.
I love that. That's perfect. You know, it's so funny because when I did my class, um every class is different in every state, right? So I was in Ohio, and that class focused so much on laws and more laws.
Yep.
I literally fell asleep 3 times, like dozed off, and then my sister-in-law was with me. She woke me up, and I remember when I passed, I thought, how did I pass that? Like, like I fell asleep 3 times. And I mean, I'm not saying anything about the instructor, but I realized I didn't really learn anything. We only shot, I don't know, maybe 15 rounds on a target. I took my gun to that in a Walmart bag, and the ammo was in another Walmart bag. I mean, I knew nothing. So that's what made me seek training. But so many people are just like, I got a gun, I'm good. I'm like,
Hmm.
no, right now without training, you have you're a liability,
Yeah.
Um, do you even know how to? Or people think that their gun comes with a cape and that they're a sheepdog and everyone's under their umbrella of protection. And I'm like, no, like there's just so much that goes into it. So you're absolutely right. And that's the bare minimum that we learn, but there's so much more to learn that goes beyond that. So
Yeah. No,
yeah,
but again, thank you. I
oh,
appreciate you coming
I,
on.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and to the listeners, we hope you enjoyed this. If you do want to reach out and take a class and everything, please go to Karen at KarenHunter.com. Find her on social media, ask her questions. She'd be more than willing to listen. Other than that, I hope you have a good one.